Greetings everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is Zakes here, and this week we wanna talk about something that has been pretty topical in South Africa as of late, and those are our race laws. Yes, all of them in their variety. Really though, the context of this discussion will be, firstly, are they there? And since they are there, what is the free market position on using said race laws for the reasons that, the state proposed to use them for? Now, of course, if you can preempt the actual reply to that question, it would be, well, the Free Market Foundation is opposed to the use of race as a legally relevant, determinant in South Africa. It is quite problematic, right? You will see this as we get into the meat of it. But on a principled basis, right, we subscribe to quite the liberal version of justice, which says that positive state action is not necessary for justice, but rather the state not doing the thing that it was doing wrong is enough, right? Positive state action in most cases that not creates problems that need further positive state action and further positive state action. And before you know it, we've justified the perpetual existence of the state. But I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here since I'm an anarchist and everything. But the topic of today's discussion would be race laws. Now, what would be race laws, right? In South Africa, I think we have a good idea of what these are, but you'd be surprised given the coverage from the media concerning this topic, especially since it has been highlighted by the Americans of different varieties over the past couple of weeks and months, one could say. But ever since the spotlight by the Americans, seemingly we have had collective amnesia among our media classes, whereby they've gone as far as saying there aren't any race laws. If any of you are keeping up with current events, you'd know what I'm talking about right now. But we live in a context whereby they are saying there aren't any race laws. But for those who are, legally trained like myself, that there's the Van Heerden case, which is pretty much authoritative in establishing race as a basis for discrimination, and it considers it fair, and it considers it as, non-contradictory with other provisions of Section 9, right? Section 9 in and of itself of the Constitution, for those who aren't following, is the basis upon which every form of race law has been enacted post the democratic elections, I guess, and the ANC came into government in 1994, right? And they started instituting things like, employment equity or broad-based economic empowerment. But a race law would be any law that seeks to use your race as a legally relevant classification. So in the BEE context, right, your race would determine, or your BEE scorecard, which includes how many people of a particular race you employed, you have in your supply chain, you have, in managerial positions, and all of those things that are in a BEE scorecard. That determines whether you get certain treatment, whether you get certain contracts from the state, right? Even though I think I don't know how the precedent of the Zakhele case, right, against Eskom, right, and the finding by the Constitutional Court that the discrimination was unfair, that was done against, I think, a white employee there. I don't know what that precedent will create at the very least for the future of state BEE influence contracts, because that's made it at the very least illegal for it to be done in that particular manner. But I'm digressing since this is not a conversation about that case specifically. But either way, the use of race as a legally relevant title, for lack of a better term, is what we're talking about. So this would be, your BEs, your Employment Equity Acts, your affirmative actions, and any other form of legislation really that seeks to, take a decision using race as a basis for that particular decision. And this is something that we all know, right? We are all quite aware of the laws that govern us in South Africa. As I've said, for those who are legally trained, there's been precedent that has been established on the use of race as a basis for the state to take particular actions, and the entire reasoning behind it, right, to still man the argument of those who are proponents of these type of policies would be race was used as a basis for discrimination in the past, and as such, to correct that race-based discrimination, you have to use the race that was used, right? You cannot escape using race to correct what was broken by race. That is the entire logic, really, of those who are proponents of that idea. And, even though one can get where that argument stems from, as I said, if one subscribes to a different version of justice or a different understanding of what justice ought to be, then they are opposed to any form of racial discrimination by the state, be it corrective racial discrimination or malicious racial discrimination. If it is racial discrimination, it should not be done, right? And if it had been done in the past, the best way to correct that would just to stop doing it, like just stop doing it. And then maybe with the passage of time, there will be a correction through natural processes. But for those who think, oh man, this dude is idealistic, there's no such thing as a correction through natural processes, there are solutions, right, to redressing the imbalances of the past, right? Just to dwell on this point, because I think that is the point and the basis upon which really race laws are enacted in South Africa, to correct the imbalances of the past. Now, if you're a libertarian, as a regular watcher of this channel, you would know that the state has no business correcting any imbalances. It created the imbalances, and as such, the best way for it to correct said imbalance is for it to just stop being involved in people's lives. That would be just a good place to begin, right? But we live in a context whereby positive state action has been normalized, right? And even within the liberal, sphere, really, in parties like the DA, for instance, right? The DA has been a proponent of a policy option that seeks to redress past imbalances, which translates themselves in economic standing or certain income levels among, a majority of Black South Africans. They have proposed, instead of using race as a basis for assistance from the state or preferential treatment by the state, they have proposed using income, right? And income will really cut across the point, right? It will get to the people who need the help and intervention the most, even though you may disagree that said intervention is justified, but it will get to those people without using the same means that were used by states that I think we can all agree, or by a government that we can all agree was pretty horrible in the past, right? But by using race, really, you kind of fall into becoming what you hate the most, for lack of a better term, because the NPU used race as a form of decision making by the state, and you are also using race, but you are not like them. So it creates those situations whereby you don't want to be caught in. And if you are interested in redressing the imbalances of the past, I think that using income as a basis for that is a much more sound option, right? But when talking about race laws, those are what they are. These are laws that use your race, use my and your race as a basis for decision making. And we have the great Martin van Staden here at the Free Market Foundation, who is an editor of the Race Law Index, which has been pretty popular as of late. If you are keeping up with any of the happenings and going ons in the country, you'd know that it has been pretty popular. And mostly, really, people who are opposed to it would say that the laws aren't racial. The laws don't use race. But as we have spoken about, really, I think the courts and the state themselves are pretty clear on what the laws are. The laws are racial, and the use of race as a basis for discrimination by the state is to redress past imbalances, right? Now, of course, the results of redressing those past imbalances speak for themselves. In most cases, they're not. BEE has tend to benefit, those Black individuals who are already, one would say, enjoying a higher economic standing, maybe through proximity to those in the state or in other means, right? But there is no form of distinction. For instance, through BE, the son of a minister who was raised in much more better material conditions than the son of a domestic worker in a township somewhere, that minister is still liable to get state assistance. That minister's son, that is still liable to get state assistance using BE, and they will most likely get it over the son of someone who was raised by domestic workers or was raised by parents who worked in the retail sector, right? I don't think that should be the case. And of course, this can be amended if the policy of using income as a basis for doing that is adopted, right? But really, most importantly, is our constitutional paradigm. Our constitution, specifically Section 9, right, is quite problematic. Maybe it deserves a different, video in and of itself, because we have a constitutional value that upholds non-racialism, that says that discrimination on the basis of race is not to be accepted except when it is done to correct past imbalances, right? And really, that is the basis upon which most race laws have been done. But I would say that we can think about it even in the comment section as a parting thought. Does that make sense, right? Is our constitution logical in saying that it upholds principles of non-racialism, it upholds or it opposes racial discrimination, whilst also allowing racial discrimination in some instances, right? I'm sure a lot has been written about this, right? And if you are a little head, you would know of the many judgments. But of course, I stand on the side that it is contradictory. You can't have both. You have to have either or, right? And as such, I think that what cuts to the core of the problem in South Africa is that we have these two conflicting ideals. We have a non-racialist value and a constitutional provision that seemingly promotes racialism if it is done for the correct reasons, as according to them. And as such, this is really, I think, the cause of the tension regarding this thing. So I leave it up to you in the comment section. Before I make the video too long, please tell me what you think. Are you in favor of race laws? Are you opposed to race laws, right? Are you maybe in favor of the option I mentioned of using income as the basis of redressing past imbalances? Please let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Give the video a like. We appreciate every form of engagement we do get. Share the video with anyone and everyone. And as always, remember, stay free.